Good afternoon, dear students. I hope everybody is fine and doing their studies. Today I brought the revision lecture of the industrial chemistry, that is, the colorful synthetic dyes. In this lecture, the following topics should be covered: the introduction of the dyes, what are dyes, the evolution of the dyes, that is, the history of these dyes, the requirement and the property of the dyes for the application, and we can classify the dyes into various types, the classification of the dyes. What is the learning outcome of this lecture? The students will be able to understand about the introduction part of the dyes. The history of the dyes come up in the evolution. The requirement and the property of the dyes for the application and various types of the dyes in the classification. So let's start the introduction part of the synthetic dyes. What are the dyes? The dyes are the colored organic compounds that are used to impart the color to the various substrates or the materials like paper, leather, fur, hair, drugs, cosmetics, waxes, greases, plastic as well as textile materials, clothes. So these are the organic compounds which are used to color various type of the materials. A dye is a colored compound normally used in the solution which is capable of being fixed to the fabric, means it go for the attachment to the fabric, having some attraction or the bond to the fabric. The dyes are the colorants which can firmly absorbed into the material to which they are applied by the physical as well as chemical bonding. I have said before, the dye should be capable of being fixed to the fabric which is used for the dyeing, and that fixation or the attraction towards the fabric can be physical or the chemical. If it is go for the physical attraction, we can say the weak attraction it is having, and that is the force of attraction called van der Waals force. Understood? So it's a physical attraction force as well as the hydrogen bonding. If they are having the hydrogen atom, it forms the bond having that physical attraction. And it can be the chemical, and that is the more stronger force of attraction. It can be in the form of ionic, cationic or the anionic attraction, as well as that is covalent bonding involving the sharing of the electrons towards the attraction. So let's see the evolution of the dyes or the history of the dyes. The preparation as well as the application of the dye stuff material, it is the one of the oldest form of the human activities. And there is also mention of it in the Bible and the other works of the classical antiquity. Means the use of the dye in the application form and the preparation of such material, it is very old and it is mentioned in the Bible also, having the classical antiquity. It was 2600 BC when earliest written records of the use of the dye stuffs were found in the China. So in 2600 BC, where we have the in the books it is written that the dyestuff material were found in the China. The first synthetic dye was picric acid was prepared in the year of 1771 from the natural pigment that is indigo. Indigo is the plant, and from that the first synthetic dye which is prepared in the year of 1771, it was picric acid. The first human-made organic dye was discovered by the William Henry Perkin in the year 1856 when he was an 18-year-old child. William Perkin, an 18 years old student, was working on chemical synthesis of the natural products. While he was working on the synthesis of the natural products, the young Perkin chanced upon his famous aniline mauve dye, which he was attempting to synthesize quinine. Quinine is the product which is used to cure the malaria, and it is only the cure for the malaria. So Perkin named his color, this aniline mauve dye he has used, the color Mervin after the French name of the non-fast color which was made of the natural dye. And so the mauve, the name given a basic dye which was the first synthetic dye stuff prepared and used by the Perkin. So this how the first synthetic dye was prepared by the William Perkin, an 18-year-old student. There always come up the question in the mind that what is the difference between dyes and the pigments, because the pigments are also the compounds which is used to impart the color to the materials. So what are pigments? The pigments consist to be the extremely fine particles of the coloring matter suspended in the liquid which forms a paint film. Always in a paint the pigments are used, actually bound to the surface where it is applied, and these are the inorganic materials. The pigments are generally the inorganic materials which have extremely fine particles of the coloring matter suspended in the liquid and form a film which actually bond to the surface where we go for applying to it. So the dyes are the organic compounds and the pigments are the inorganic materials. Next come, there are various types of the dye to be used in the application. So let's see the classification of the dyes, and there are several ways to understand the classification, and it is a wide topic for the dyes to understand the various types of the dye. So each class of the dye has a very unique chemistry behind that, its structure as well as particular way of bonding. While some of the dyes can react chemically with the substrates, as we have seen, they have the chemical bonding, either cationic or anionic or the covalent, as well as it is having either the physical attraction towards each other, forming the strong bonds in the process. The chemical bonding or the chemical attraction form the strong bonds in the process, and others can be held by the physical forces that are less strong than the chemical. So the classification has a wide area of the dyes for the application, for its composition, for it, the source from which it is obtained. So let's begin the criteria of the classification of the dyes with each one of the application, including the examples. The first classification come up to understand, it is based on the source of the materials from which the dyes are prepared. So we can classify on the basis of this into two types. The one is natural dyes and the synthetic dyes. The natural dyes are prepared from the natural material, specifically from the plant parts. It can be of the roots, barks, leaves, from each one of the plant part. Here you can able to see the diagram of the natural dyes here, the greener part. It can be the source of the material is the plant. It is also called the vegetable dyes. The natural dyes are also called the vegetable dyes because all the parts, they are the natural source of the material. And even some minerals. From the minerals and the plant parts, they are the vegetable dyes considered to be the natural dyes. The another the dye that is involved the chemicals here. So which involve the chemicals and they are prepared synthetically in the laboratory. So they are the man-made dyes. The source of materials involve the chemicals. So that are considered to be the synthetic dyes. So the natural dyes, or these are the colorants derived from the plants and the minerals. The majority of the natural dyes are the vegetable dyes from the plant sources like roots, berries, bark, leaves. Understood? So all the plant parts, either from the roots, berries, bark, leaves, as well as wood, from that it is derived, that are called the natural dyes, and it is used to color the cotton fabrics, silk fabrics. So the one of the example of the natural dye is the indigo dye. Indigo is the natural dye prepared from the plant, that is the deep blue color dye. Nowadays the indigo dye can be prepared synthetically also, that deep blue colored dye synthetically also it is produced, but it is the famous plant natural dye. Synthetic dyes are the man-made dyes used everywhere, in everything. Nowadays we are using the synthetic dyes in everything, from the clothes to the paper, from the food to the wood. We are using the synthetic dyes. Why? This is because they are cheaper to produce. the cost of producing such dyes, it is having the cheap as compared to the natural dyes, and they are brighter. The color which is produced by these dyes, which are more brighter and attract the consumers. More color fastening property, having the withstand property under all the conditions. The color fastening property is very good as compared to the natural. And the another important advantage to use the synthetic dyes, that is, it is easy to apply to the fabric where we want to dye the material. So various synthetic dyes, we have a large number of the category in the synthetic dyes, like acid dyes, azo dyes, basic dyes, modern dyes. So all these dyes come up in the category of the synthetic dye. So we can say, as compared to the natural dyes, they are cheaper to produce, more brighter to attract any kind of the consumer to just purchase out that fabric, and more color fastening property and very easy to apply. So these properties make up the synthetic dyes to be used everywhere. So this is the one of the classification that is based on the source of the materials, that is natural and the synthetic dyes. In the next lecture, we are going to see the another mode of the classification. Thank you and take care.